Hello students, today we are going to discuss plot summary of 1984. So that will be there, that will be moved according to parts and chapters, right? So this summary is divided into three parts, like a novel is divided into three parts and there are different chapters. So at a glance we are going to see that how many chapters in one part. So in one part here chapter 1, and then it will be chapter 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And then there are 8 chapters in part 1, right? In part 2 there will be 10 chapters, right? So here I'm just showing you that that will be the chapter 10, right? Part 2 chapter 10, and then in part 3, that is the part 3 here of chapter 6, right? So then accordingly we are going to discuss, and then every chapter then analysis. So then one chapter I am making video on the basis of chapter sorry part. So then there will be 3 videos. First I have made in the morning, that's not full, but then here I'm making it again. So here I would start from here, that will be part 2 I am making, and then part 1 I will make tomorrow, right? So here I am directly making from part 2, right? So let us see what's the part 2. uh, yeah, that is part 2 and part 2 chapter 1, right? So see what's the part 2 chapter 1. Now, what happened? Winston is back at work, and as he walks through a corridor, the girl with dark hair stumbles to the floor right in front of him. He starts to help her up, and she crams a small note in his hand. Now, what happened? Winston meets a girl, and that's a dark hair girl. She is moving in the corridor. Now time is standing still as he sits, and then yes, there is one note in his hand, so that he cramps a small note in his hand. Time standing still as he sits in his cubicle, waiting for an opportune time to read the note. So that note is given by the girl, and Winston is uh, standing and he wants to read it out. So that he sits in his cubicle, waiting for an opportune time to read the note. So that he is curious that what is written in that note. So then when he finally reads it, he is shocked. He stares at it again to make sure he read it right. I love you. So in that note, which is given by the girl, in that note it is written that I love you. And then as Vincent reads, and he becomes shocked because it's a big crime. Suddenly, he is filled with desire. But being a human being, Winston has desires, and that's why he becomes, though he knows that is very big crime, but still he becomes happy when he reads a note is given by the girl, and in the note that as he reads the I love you, he is filled with desire. And she appears disappears for a few days, and he is unsure whether the thought police vaporized her or she killed herself. And then after giving that note, the girl disappears for some time. So Winston thinks that whether the thought police vaporized her or she killed herself. Either she is targeted by thought police, or maybe she kills herself. She must have killed herself. And then after her reappearance, he makes a few attempts to get her alone. at a lunch table. Now, then she reappears, and then he makes a few attempts to get her alone at a lunch table. So she thinks uh, for like to be alone in the lunch table. He finally succeeds, and they make arrangements to meet outside at of work. So they decide to meet outside. At their brief meeting at Victory Square, they arrange another meeting when they can spend more time. So they meet outside, and that's a Victory Square where that's a Winston Smith lives. So they meet there, but then they know that they are under surveillance. So they arrange another meeting when they can spend more time. Now in part 2, chapter 1, so analysis, that's a noun analysis, that as a girl with dark hair approaches Winston, Orwell describes her as a solitary figure. This is symbolic because before he and Julia make their union, this is what they both were. It had been 4 days since he had seen her outside of Mr. Charrington's shop. So then, what happened? Julia and Winston Smith make their union, and that is why they both were. And then it had been 4 days since he had seen her outside of Mr. Charrington's shop. So then there is a Mr. Charrington, and then they meet Mr. Charrington's shop. When he saw her last, he had considered her the enemy and had contemplated bludgeon her to death. And then when he meets in the beginning, he sees Julia. So Winston thinks that she's the spy of ministry, but then later on he comes to know that she is also like-minded lady. And then yet when he saw her fall onto the floor with an already bandaged arm, his first instinct was to help her. So then here he when after disappears, Julia gives the note that in which it is written that I love you, but she disappears. So Winston Smith becomes panicked that either she is targeted, victimized by thought police, or must have killed herself. But then as she reappears, and and then they start meeting. Then Winston, and one day she fall onto the floor. So Winston wants to help her. He saw the human in her, and then he thinks that she's also a human being. Julia is also a human being. Feelings welled up in him to which he was not accustomed. In this chapter, the element of love enters the scene. Love is synonymous with hope. Winston will to live grows stronger, as does his sense of purpose. The first inkling of being alive comes with the idea of love. This is another place in the book where Orwell connects having feelings with being human. So why? Because both are human being. They need they have emotional need, physical need. As the government strips away the liberty of feelings, and then even the capacity to feel, they are actually dehumanizing them. So what government is doing that they government is treating human being like machine, and human beings are being dehumanizing. So that is the reality of Oceana. Now, in chapter 2, that on the appointed day Winston made his way to the meeting spot. He arrived first and gathered some bluebells for the girl from the thick mass of them he had to walk through. She approached him from behind and made a motion to stay quiet. When they got a little further, she broke the silence. They exchanged various pieces of introductory information while she shares some chocolate she had gotten from the black market because chocolates are not easily available. So she brings chocolate, Julia brings chocolate for Winston Smith, and they walked along and came to posture with a path meandering through it and intermittent molehills. When they meet, right, and then they gasp with delight. The golden country, he had seen this landscape in dreams. They engaged in a romantic interlude and fell asleep. So they meet. Means this is the chapter part two. Chapter two is somewhat that's a meeting, and they enjoy meeting. They enjoy spending time with each other. Now, the use of the senses to represent life is obvious here. The color of bluebells, the gold of sunlight, the taste of real chocolate, romantic pleasure, hot sunlight on their faces, and the softness of her body and hair all give the feeling that in this scene they are really alive, because otherwise they are dead without feelings. They are just like machine, but now they are enjoying spending time with each other, and then they feel they feel far away from the cold gray mechanical emotionless dead world, because they are enjoying life, and that has become their reality now. Next, then part 3, part 2, chapter 3 is that upon awakening, Julia returned to her businesslike demeanor and gave him instructions for his return home. So then they awakened. Julia returned to her businesslike demeanor and gave him instruction for his return home, and they had planned to use this hideous one more time, but they never returned. They met once in a dilapidated home church, but usually only in the streets among the crowds. They could talk by installments, which meant they walked separately and would cut in and out of conversation as they passed each other. Sometimes they had to leave a planned meeting spot without speaking because a patrol had just come by or a helicopter was circling. So in chapter 3 we find that Julia and then now after meeting they are being separated, and they plan that not to uh, they have to behave in a very balanced way, and they cannot meet again. And then when they are in public, so they will not acknowledge each other, they will talk less, their conversation is very less this way. And why? Because when they had to leave a planned meeting, sometimes they drop their planned meeting without speaking because there is patrolling, there is helicopter which is circling, and that's why they know that it's not possible to meet. So that's a there is a stark contrast from this chapter to the last. They are back in their usual work routine, drones going through the motions, and there are drones, and they are being watched by drones. A bomb explodes, covering them with white plaster. When they get up from the blast, Winston sees Julia with the white plaster covering her skin and thinks she's dead. So that's a war, and then they declare there is bomb blast, and Winston thinking that Julia's body is covered with uh, white plaster, and this is symbolic because as soon as they are back in the party system, they are dead again. So then they enjoy their life, and then when they separate, so they start behaving like a machine. So this is chapter 3. Now chapter 4. Chapter 4 is that the summary of chapter 4 is Winston's eyes move around the small room upstairs from Mr. Charrington's shop, and he was still surprised at himself for having rented it as a romantic rendezvous point for him and Julia. They enjoyed real coffee with sugar. A rat visits and causes Winston to become pale. He is terrified of rats. They make a plan to rat proof the room as best as possible. So in this chapter, Winston eye moves around the small room upstairs from Barrington's shop. So Winston thinks that he was still surprised at himself for having rented it as a romantic rendezvous point of view for Julia. So he is not believing, Winston is not believing that Julia is with her and they are enjoying life. They are living life. They are experiencing their life, real life. So they enjoyed coffee, sugar, and then here also that rat. That's a very Winston is frightened with the rats. He has he is scared with rats. So that's a they plan that this room should be rat proof. So then they will do the best, and the next time they will clean the room so that there will be no rat. And then what the analysis, the same themes we have seen continue here: the smell of real coffee, the taste of real sugar, the colors of face makeup that Julia put on, and all the feelings that go with these things. That uh, ticking clock continues the theme of their time running out, and he reflected on the paperweight in yet another way. The paperweight was the room he was in, the coral was his and Julia's lives held in infinity in the center of the crystal. So finally, they are living their life, smiling, power, touching, every feeling they enjoy, right? And they both, Winston and Julia, enjoying life, right? So that is there. And then but at the same time they watch clock, and then they know that a watch is continuously ticking, means time is going on, time is running out. So this way. Now chapter 5 is the Syme had finally been vaporized, and Winston knew it would be coming for him eventually, and now it had happened. He glanced at a list of chess committee and found that Syme's name had disappeared altogether. This was the usual way when the thought police got you. All necessary changes in all records are made to make sure you had never even existed. So Syme had finally been vaporized. So that's a one thing which is disappeared, which is what deleted, finally deleted. And Winston knew it would be coming for him eventually, and now it had happened. And then Winston is aware about all these. He glanced at a list of chess committee and found that Syme's name had disappeared altogether. So then there is chess committee, and Winston is aware about it, that Syme's name is totally disappeared. And then this was the usual way when the thought police got you. So this is the modus operandi of thought police, and he works this way, that all necessary changes in all the records are made to make sure you had never even existed, means from everywhere Syme's name is disappeared. Well, Winston and Julia continued to meet at Charrington's shop. Every moment they had together, they knew it won't be much longer before the end. They had to be found out. Meeting in the same place so often meant sure death. So Winston and Julia continuously meeting in Charrington's shop, and then they are quite aware that it will not go longer, and one day, if um, they caught, so that definitely they will. It's a big problem to them. It leads to death. Now, they often lay naked, discussing the possibility of existence of Goldstein underground army. So they often lay naked, discussing the possibility of existence of Goldstein underground army, the Brotherhood. What? That's a then they often lay uh, naked, discussing the possibility of existence of Goldstein's underground army, the Brotherhood, and then Winston is shocked to find out that Julia believed the Oceana had always been at war with Eurasia. In reality, just 4 years ago, Oceania was at war with East Asia. She had bought in to what the party created. She did not understand why it was such a big deal. He was mortified that she did not see that the past was being destroyed right in front of their eyes and nobody noticed. So here what happened? Winston and Julia continued to meet in Charrington shop. Every moment they are quite aware that if they one day it will not go longer, and then if they caught, definitely it will lead to death. Then they often lay naked, discussing the possibility of existence of Goldstein's underground army, and then they talked about the underground army, and then the existence of this army, the Brotherhood. Winston is shocked to find out that Julia believed the Oceania had always been at war with Eurasia. So then, in a discussion, Winston is shocked when he comes to know that Julia believed in Oceania is in with uh, war in Eurasia. In reality, just 4 years ago, Oceania was at war with East Asia. So she said she had bought into what the party created. So then she did not understand why it was such a big deal. He was mortified that she did not see that the past was being destroyed right in front of their eyes and nobody noticed. And then here Winston is thinking that Julia is not aware that truth is being eradicated by Winston himself, and Julia believes that Oceania is in war with East Asia, Eurasia, something. So that words like windowless, stench, horror, hate, faked, as embellishing, funeral, and angry all continue the tone of the world condition in 1984. So, as perpetrations of hate we culminate, we see the many ways the Orwell believes the government can program us. For instance, movies, parades, slogans, lectures, fake photographs, rooms, reproduction of books, songs, posters, etc. Right? So that is everything is moving according to government. Now, chapter 6, the moment he had been dreaming about for so long finally happened. O'Brien made his move to speak to him outside of work. In order to get Winston his address, he used the execute of needing to get the 10th edition of Newspeak dictionary to him. So the moment he had been dreaming about for so long finally happened. O'Brien made his move to speak to him outside of work. So Brian talks with Winston. In order to get Winston his address, he used the excuse of needing to get the 10th edition of Newspeak dictionary to him. Under usual circumstances, no one was to know the location of a person's home or see one another outside of work. His mind jumped to the process that had started with the opening of the diary and culminating at this moment with this summon from O'Brien. Even in his excitement, he felt dreader than ever. So Winston O'Brien made his move to speak to him, to Winston outside of work, and then O'Brien talks and he says to Winston that they are going to meet outside in order to get Winston his address. He used uh, the excuse of needing to get the 10th edition of Newspeak dictionary to him. Under usual circumstances, no one was to know the location of person's home. So generally, people does not like a person does not know other person's home or see one another outside of work, and then they don't want to meet outside the work. His mind jumped to the process that had started with the opening of the diary and culminating at this moment with this summons from O'Brien. Even in his excitement, he felt deader than ever. So here, all of a sudden, Winston feels deader, right? So then, more words such as death, chilly, frightening, shuddering, dampness, and grave continue the mood. The place where O'Brien confronted him was almost the exact spot where Julia slipped him the note, which was in the Ministry of Love. So, Winston O'Brien meets with Winston, and that's the same place where Julia slipped the note in which she had written, I love you. So, Winston somewhat, his gut feeling says that something is bad to be done, and which was in the Ministry of Love. And in the Ministry of Love, death, chilly, frightening, these words frequently used or felt, right? And this is ironic because this ministry is this arm of government that is responsible for law and order. In a very subtle way, Orwell shows us another method used to control camaraderie. By seeming friendly and on the same page as Winston, O'Brien is more easily able to manipulate him. So, here Orwell shows us another method used to control camaraderie. Friendship. Like if you want to control someone, so then you have to be friendly. By seeming friendly and on the same page as Winston, O'Brien is more easily able to manipulate him. So O'Brien makes Winston feel that he is in the same page, and this is another warning that there is always more than meets the eyes when it comes to government. Feelings of camaraderie can lull a person into false sense of security as with Winston here. So that Winston is thinking that O'Brien is his good friend, and that's a camaraderie, that's a friendly attitude of O'Brien makes Winston more confident that he he is safe, and a sense of security is developed in Winston's mind as O'Brien is with Winston. This is the thinking of Winston. Now in chapter 7, Winston awoke. He had been dreaming of his mother again. He told Julia about the dream and explained many details of the part of his childhood that he remembered. So here uh, Winston awoke, and then he shared his dreaming of his mother, and he shared this dream with Julia in his childhood and everything. The moment he awoke was the first time he knew that he did not murder his mother. And then what he sees in his dream, and first time he knew that he did not murder his mother. He had believed that he indirectly was responsible for her murder until just then. He remembered war and chaos, rubble in the street, and always being hungry. When his father had disappeared, his mother did not show any outward emotion, but her demeanor changed. He remembered that. So, here Winston remembering her days, childhood days, he remembered that she became spiritless. Mother became spiritless. She moved through the motions of life and duties of child rearing quietly and mechanically. He recalled how selfish he was in his youth, how he actually stole food from his baby sister because his hunger was so overwhelming and and continuous, so that he remembers that how he snatched the fruit from baby sister. This conversation uh, turned into a discussion about what would happen when they were caught. And then he's sharing his dreams and childhood days with Julia, and all of a sudden they changed the topic and they were thinking that if they caught, so what would happen. They figured at the minimum there would be physical torture in various forms. So they imagine, they think that there will be physical torture in various form, drugs, forced sleeplessness, and then long periods of solitude, machines that monitor nervous responses, and endless questioning. So they are quite aware that what is to be done if they caught. They agreed that they would both confess to things they did and even things they did not, to in an effort to save themselves from any further horror. So they decide that they are going to confess though what they did, and they what they didn't even they are going to accept. So they agree with righteous indignation that no matter what they confess, no one could get them to change their feelings for each other. But then they decide that whatever we have to accept, we are going to accept, but we will never change our feelings for one another. Wilson thought about all the methods of torture they would use and decided that it did not matter because they couldn't ever get inside the mind. So they are quite aware about it. So that Winston awakes with tears in his eyes, and Julia asks him what's wrong. He explains the dream he had been having. It all took place inside the coral and glass paperweight. So then Winston shares, and then Julia asks that why he's crying, and he talks about, he shares that how much ruthless, how much cruel he was, and he snatched food, and he shares all his childhood days and dreams. And then he keeps seeing himself and his life as the little pink coral trapped inside the glass, and then that's a paperweight. So he paperweight is symbolic actually, and then that through paperweight he says that my life is just inside the glass, outside the glass nothing. So Winston remarks that the proles are humans and they are not. So that what he thinks that the proletarians, that they are at least human being, but we are educated people are not. The degree of lifelessness he feels is so deep that he does not even feel like one of the species. And he tells to Julia that what life we are leading, it's uh, just a dead life. The party has taken every aspect of humanity, so that he says to Julia that the party has taken every aspect of humanity out of human experience, and we are not at all, we are not left human, we are just machine. Now chapter 8 Winston and Julia finally get up the nerve to go to O'Brien house, and they get to see firsthand the luxuries of members of inner party. So now they are ready to go to Brian's house, and they get to see firsthand the luxuries of members of the inner party, so that they see that how luxurious life the members of inner party lead, very luxurious life, clean accommodations, real coffee, a servant, even permission to shut off the tele screen for short period, and then inner party members have permission to shut off telescreen for some time. So O'Brien gets right down to business, explaining as much of the details of the brotherhood as possible. And here O'Brien shares his feelings, and he talks about brotherhood, the details of brotherhood. The guests were surprised to find out that even the servant was the member of secret anti-government coalition. So then guests are really surprised that the servant was a member of secret anti-government coalition, and that anti-government coalition is brotherhood. So O'Brien outlines the requirements of membership. They must be willing to steal, betray, be involved in things that could cause the death of thousands of innocent people. So then that O'Brien outlines the requirements of membership, and they must be willing to steal, betray, be involved in things that could cause the death of thousands of innocent people, and anything else that is deemed necessary to the moment. They eagerly agreed to everything except separation from each other. So then they are agreed to each other, and he explained the the way in which Winston would receive a copy of Goldstein's book to study. When they parted, O'Brien started to say, "We shall meet again," and Winston, remembering his dream, finished his sentence, "In the place where there is no darkness." O'Brien confirmed, and Winston and Julia left. So here, what happened? Orwell um, shows the inherent hypocrisy of the inner party in the description of O'Brien's quarters. So here Orwell is trying to show that how much hypocritic these people, the richness of blue carpet gave one the impression of trading on velvet, means very luxurious life they lead, inner party members lead. There was cream colored wallpaper, and the whole place was perfectly clean. So that if neat and clean house, and then well maintained and very big house. So There were cigarettes kept in silver box wrapped with silky papers. They actually kept the tobacco in. So everything is very much luxurious, and they had real wine, and the telescreen could be shut off. The scene, in comparison to the lives to those outside of the inner party, was reminiscent of how Big Brother described life in the time of capitalists. So this is something. Now chapter 9. Winston is exhausted from his party of the work in carrying out Hate Week. During the festivities of the sixth day of the celebrated week, the crowd watched an excitement as the speaker explained that they were no longer at the war with Eurasia. So they were now their allies. So Winston is exhausted from his part of work in carrying out Hate Week. So Winston is very much frustrated to work and carrying out Hate Week during the festivities of sixth day of celebrated week. The crowd watched with excitement as the speaker explained that they were no longer at war with Eurasia. They were now their allies. So that Winston is getting frustrated because Hate Week is being celebrated, and then speaker explained that now they were no longer at war. There is no war with Eurasia, and they are allies now. So then the new enemy was East Asia, because now Oceania and Eurasia have allied, and now new enemy is East Asia. The crowd picked up and placed their fury on the new enemy without missing a beat. Nobody asked any question or even wondered at apartment contradiction. Now they had always been at war with East Asia. All of the records would soon reflected this change, and it would be made permanent. In the midst of the irate insanity, Winston was given Goldstein's book in the way that O'Brien had outlined. The only hope he had left was now in his briefcase. So the new enemy is Astasia, and that the crowd picked up and placed their fury on the new enemy without missing a beat. And now common people, they are against East Asia, because now new enemy is East Asia. Nobody asked any question or even wondered at the apartment apparent contradiction. And then people are very gullible, and very simply they accept the contradiction. Than earlier we Oceania had war with Eurasia. Now if they say that it's allies now, and now new enemy is the East Asia. So people, without making any question argue, they accept all contradiction. Now they had always been at war with East Asia now, and now the new enemy is East Asia, and all of the records would soon reflect this change, and it would be made permanent, and all change will become permanent. In the midst of irate insanity, Winston was given Goldstein books in the way that O'Brien had outlined, and then O'Brien gives one book, Goldstein's book, and then the only hope he had left was now in his briefcase. After hurrying to the square space about Mr. Charrington's shop, he lay intently focusing on each word of the text as he read. Therein lay the reality of the world situation according to Goldstein, and he pored over the material until Julia arrived, at which point he started back at the beginning and read to her. As he continued to read, he realized that he was receiving more information as to how the system worked out, but he still did not have any insight into why. So this is all about that's a um, Goldstein's book where norms and everything is written. So then he is making hurry and they meet in Mr. Charrington's shop, and then he lay intently focusing on each word, and he reads the book, Goldstein book, very carefully, and then therein lay the reality of the whole situation according to Goldstein, and then everything is modified, distorted. He poured over the material unto Julia arrive, and then until Julia arrives, and then Julia comes, and then they started back at the beginning and then read to her, and then again he read that all norms to Julia, and he continued to read, and he realized that he was receiving more information because Julia gives more information. Now Orwell described Hate Week when the great orgasm was quivering to its climax, and general hatred of Eurasia had boiled up into such a delirium that if the crowd could have got their hands on the 2000 Eurasian war criminals that were to be policy hanged, and they would have unquestionably torn them to pieces. At, at just this moment, it was announced that Oceania was not, after all, at war with Eurasia, and they announced that now we are allies, and Oceania was war with East Asia. East Asia was an ally. The fact that Orwell describes this intentional summoning of hate in terms of organ in not a coincidence. It had been a theme throughout the book that the party, by controlling the sex act, uses pent up energy as fuel to perpetuate their system as soon as the announcement to the public changed the status of enemy. Everyone threw their force into the new proclamation without question. Now, last chapter of part 2, Winston and Julia awoke to their destiny. A voice behind the picture they had often talked about while enjoying their private time spoke with an iron voice. It informed them not to move and that the house was surrounded. As Mr. Charrington walked in with a changed demeanor, they knew that they were looking at a member of Thought Police. Now it's a very terrific chapter. Last, Winston and Julia awoke to their destiny. A voice behind the picture they had often talked about while enjoying their private time spoke with an iron voice. So now than what they enjoyed, they talked each other. Now that voice behind the picture, and then it is being reflected, it is being echoed, and it informed them not to move, and they are warned that not to move because this house is surrounded. And Mr. Charrington shows his another changed demeanor appearance, and they knew that they were looking at the member of the, and then now they understood that now they are the member of Thought Police, and then Mr. Charrington is also the member of Thought Police. The woman downstairs from the apartment they rented from Mr. Charrington was always singing. They could hear her clearly from the open window every time they were there. The words she sang are another strain of the theme of the inevitableness of their capture and the nature of unavoidable process to follow. She sang, it was only an hopeless fancy. It passed like an April day. But look and a word and the dreams they stirred. They have stolen my at heart. So it was a hopeless fancy to think that there was ever chance of getting away with their flagrant disrespect of the party rules. That their time together was short and passed quickly, the result of torturous process of molding them to party specifications resulted in the party stealing even their hearts. When the thought police entered, one of them picked up the coral and glass paperweight and threw it, smashing it into pieces. This is symbolic of their hope being destroyed and their fantasy lives being obliterated as the tiny piece of coral rolled across the floor. Winston thought how small it always was. This is symbolic of the smallness of effort compared to all encompassing strength of party. So now they are under arrest. Thought police come, right? And now that they pick up the coral and glass paperweight, threw it, and then when it is into pieces means their love into pieces, and that all fantasy and everything is a very small time, right? They spent together, and party had shown its interest. So here I'm winding up, and now part 3 next video. Okay, thank you so much. Bye. It will be continued with part 3 very soon. Thank you so much.